Owen Reed pressed his forehead against the cold observation window and watched the creature pace. Back and forth, 6 limbs moving in perfect rhythm across the containment cell. The Crimson Stalker's obsidian scales caught the artificial light and turned it into fragments of deep red, like blood frozen in black ice. Beautiful, terrifying, alone, just like him. Get away from there, human. The voice cut through his thoughts like a blade. Dr. Hallis stood 3 meters away, all 4 of his arms crossed over his chest in the Centauri expression of extreme disapproval. That thing has killed before. It will kill again. Owen stepped back from the glass but kept his eyes on the creature. Permission to speak, sir? Denied. You are here to clean floors and dispose of waste, not to think. Dr. Hallis's eye stalks swiveled to examine Owen from multiple angles. Though I suppose thinking is difficult for your species anyway. How Earth ever produced starflight remains the galaxy's greatest mystery. 3 other researchers laughed. Owen had heard it all before during his 2 weeks aboard Deepwatch 7. Humans were weak. Humans were slow. Humans only survived because they bred quickly and fought dirty. The Galactic Union had accepted Earth 300 years ago, but acceptance did not mean respect. Owen picked up his cleaning supplies and moved to the next observation room. Through the reinforced glass, he could see the Crimson Stalker from a different angle. The creature was massive, nearly 4 meters long, with a body built for killing. Its 6 limbs ended in claws that could tear through steel. Its head held too many teeth and eyes that tracked movement with predatory focus. The station had captured it 6 months ago from Crimson Ridge, a death world where everything wanted to kill everything else. The creature was scheduled for termination in 3 days. Owen had read the reports. The Crimson Stalker had injured 3 researchers, who tried to condition it with punishment and reward. It refused to eat. It destroyed everything placed in its cell. Dr. Hallis had written in his notes that the creature was mindless, driven only by violence and instinct. But Owen saw something else. He saw the way the creature always returned to the same corner of its cell. The way it arranged the torn bedding into a specific pattern, the way it touched that pattern gently with one claw before beginning its endless pacing again. Owen knew grief when he saw it. His datapad buzzed. Another message from his mother back on Earth, asking how the internship was going. Owen deleted it without reading. How could he explain that his expensive education meant nothing here? That his top marks in xenobiology from the Mars Academy were dismissed as typical human-grade inflation? That he spent his days scrubbing floors while others half his intelligence ran experiments? Read, Dr. Hallis's voice echoed through the corridor. There is a chemical spill in Lab 7. Clean it before it eats through the deck plating. Yes. Sir? Owen gathered his supplies and headed toward the lab, but he took the long route that passed by the main observation gallery. A crowd had gathered at the windows. Owen worked his way to the edge and looked down into the containment area. The Crimson Stalker had stopped pacing. It sat in the center of its cell perfectly still. 3 security officers stood outside with shock rifles charged. One held a datapad and read from it in a bored voice. Subject has failed all conditioning protocols. Subject shows no capacity for learning. Subject poses unacceptable risk to station personnel. Termination approved by Director Ullix. Execution scheduled for Aero 800 hours station time 3 days from now. The creature's head tilted slightly at the sound of the voice. Its eyes, all 6 of them, focused on the security officer. Then it opened its mouth and made a sound Owen had never heard before. Not a roar, not a growl. Something between a song and a scream that made every researcher in the gallery step back from the windows. Fascinating, said Petra, the avian researcher who sometimes spoke to Owen without insults. Her feathers ruffled with interest. That vocalization pattern is not in any of our databases. Meaningless noise, Dr. Hallis said. The creature is Deathworld fauna. It has no language, no culture, no thoughts beyond hunt and kill. Owen watched the Crimson Stalker settle back into stillness. The creature's eyes swept across the gallery, looking at each face behind the glass. When those eyes reached Owen, they stopped. The moment stretched. Owen felt his heart beating hard against his ribs. He should look away. He should step back like the others. Instead, he raised one hand slowly and placed his palm flat against the observation window. The gallery went silent. Someone gasped. Dr. Hallis made a strangled noise of shock. The Crimson Stalker rose to its feet. It moved across the cell with fluid grace, each step deliberate. It stopped at the wall below Owen's window. Then, with careful precision, it raised one massive clawed limb and pressed it against the glass directly opposite Owen's hand. They stayed like that for 5 heartbeats, human and predator, separated by reinforced glass and a galaxy of misunderstanding. "Read." Dr. Hallis grabbed Owen's shoulder and yanked him away from the window. "Have you lost your primitive mind? That creature could have what?" Owen's voice came out steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "It could have done nothing, sir. There is reinforced glass between us. The creature knows that. I know that. It chose to respond peacefully. It chose nothing. It has no capacity for choice." Dr. Hallis's eye stalks quivered with rage. "Get to Lab 7 and clean that spill. Then report to my office. We will discuss your future on this station." Owen walked away, but he looked back once. The Crimson Stalker still stood at the glass, watching him go. As Owen turned the corner, he heard that sound again. The not roar, not growl. The something like a song. He knew what he had to do. That night, after his shift ended and the research areas grew quiet, Owen returned to the observation gallery. He carried his datapad and his father's old field journal, the one filled with notes about Australian saltwater crocodiles and taipan snakes and great white sharks. His father had been a wildlife ranger before the cancer took him. He had taught Owen one lesson above all others: respect the predator, learn its language, understand its world, never assume that teeth and claws mean stupidity. Owen sat down at the observation window and opened his datapad. He pulled up every video file of the Crimson Stalker, every behavior log, every failed conditioning attempt. He began to watch and to think. The creature's patterns were not random. The destroyed objects were not pointless destruction. There was structure here. There was meaning. He worked through the night, making notes, forming theories. As the station's artificial dawn began to brighten the corridors, Owen looked up from his datapad and found the Crimson Stalker sitting in its cell, looking directly at him. The creature's head tilted. A question without words. Owen smiled and tilted his own head and mirror. Then he took an energy bar from his pocket and broke it in half. He ate one piece, then placed the other piece against the glass. An offering. A message: I share food. I recognize you as worthy. The Crimson Stalker studied him for a long moment. Then it reached into the corner of its cell and picked up a piece of the torn bedding. It carried the fabric to the glass wall and placed it down carefully, directly opposite Owen's energy bar. An offering returned. A message received. Owen felt something unlock in his chest. His father's voice echoed in his memory. They are not monsters. They are just trying to survive in a world that fears them. He pressed his hand to the glass again. The creature pressed its claw to match. Tomorrow, Owen knew everything would change. Dr. Hallis would try to remove him from the station. The other researchers would call him crazy. The security teams would increase their watch. But none of that mattered now. He had made first contact and the predator had answered. The meeting with Dr. Hallis lasted exactly 4 minutes. Owen spent 3 of those minutes standing at attention, while the Centauri scientist delivered a lecture about protocols, safety regulations, and the limited intellectual capacity of human interns. The 4th minute consisted of his official reprimand being entered into the station records. "You will not approach the containment areas except during assigned cleaning duties," Dr. Hallis said, his eye stalks rigid with disapproval. "You will not interact with experimental subjects. You will not waste station resources on foolish theories about Deathworld fauna. Am I understood?" "Yes, sir." Dismissed. Owen left the office and walked straight to the station library. If he could not observe the creature in person, he would learn everything else about it instead. The database had files on Crimson Ridge dating back 80 years, when the first survey team had landed and barely escaped with their lives. Crimson Ridge was rated as a Class 9 death world. Class 10 was considered uninhabitable by any known species. The planet's gravity was crushing. The atmosphere burned lungs. The temperature swung from boiling to freezing within hours. Every plant had poison. Every animal had weapons. The Crimson Stalkers sat at the top of the food chain, hunting in family packs that controlled vast territories. Family packs. Owen pulled up the capture report for the creature in containment. The survey team had used tranquilizer drones to bring down a stalker, defending what they thought was a den. When they retrieved the body, still alive barely, They found 3 smaller stalkers inside the den. Young ones. The team had tried to capture those too, but the juveniles had died during transport. The toxins used to subdue the adult had contaminated the den atmosphere. The creature in the cell had watched its children die. Owen closed the file and leaned back in his chair. Around him, the library hummed with activity. Researchers from a dozen species worked at their stations, running calculations and analyzing samples. None of them looked at Owen. The human cleaning boy did not exist in their world of important science. Good. That meant they would not notice what he was about to do. Owen spent his lunch break studying Crimson Ridge vocal patterns. The limited research suggested the stalkers used a combination of sounds and physical gestures to communicate within their packs. Unfortunately, most researchers dismissed this as simple animal coordination, like earth wolves hunting together. But Owen read between the lines. The patterns were too complex. The interactions were too deliberate. He downloaded everything to his data pad and returned to work. His afternoon assignment took him through the lower corridors near the waste processing systems. Dirty work that no one else wanted. Perfect. Because the waste routes ran directly beneath the containment areas, and the maintenance hatches provided access to the ventilation systems, Owen waited until the corridor was empty, then opened a hatch and climbed into the narrow service tunnel. He crawled through dust and old wiring until he reached a junction point directly under the Crimson Stalker's cell. Here, the ventilation shaft had a metal grate that allowed sound to travel between levels. He settled into a crouch and pulled out his data pad. Then he played the recorded vocalizations from Crimson Ridge packs. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Owen heard movement above him. Heavy footsteps. The creature had heard the sounds and was responding. Owen stopped the playback and waited. 10 seconds passed. 20. Then the Crimson Stalker made a sound, a low rumble that vibrated through the grate. Owen recorded it, played it back. The creature responded with a different sound, slightly higher pitched. Owen recorded that one too. Back and forth they went, building a library of calls and responses. The creature seemed to understand what Owen was trying to do. It repeated sounds when Owen played them incorrectly. It added new variations when Owen got them right. An hour later, Owen had 15 distinct vocalizations and a growing understanding of their structure. One sound meant attention, another meant acknowledgement. A third carried the weight of a question. He climbed out of the service tunnel with dust in his hair and hope in his chest. That night, after his shift, Owen returned to the observation gallery. Dr. Hallis had banned him from approaching the containment areas. But technically, the gallery was a public space. He could watch. He could learn. The Crimson Stalker lay in the corner where it always arranged the torn bedding. But tonight, the pattern was different. The creature had created a circle of fabric pieces, each one placed with careful precision. 7 pieces, 7 points. Like a star, Owen pulled up his notes. 7 members in a Crimson Stalker pack. Parents, 4 juveniles, and 1 elder advisor. The survey reports had mentioned this structure. Family groups that hunted together, raised young together, defended territory together. The creature was building a memorial. Owen felt something break inside him. This magnificent predator was grieving in the only way it knew how. And the galaxy's greatest scientific minds called it mindless. They scheduled its execution and called it mercy. They would never know what they had destroyed, unless Owen showed them. He took a nutrition pack from his bag and placed it against the observation window. Then he arranged his own items in a pattern, 7 pieces total. His data pad, his father's journal and energy bar, a cleaning rag, his station ID badge, a stylus, and a photo of his family from before his father died. 7 points. 7 meanings. His own pack separated by death and distance. The Crimson Stalker raised its head. Those 6 eyes focused on Owen's arrangement. The creature stood slowly and approached the glass. It studied the pattern for a long time. Then it lifted one clawed limb and traced the shape of Owen's star pattern in the air. Understanding flowed between them like electricity. Owen placed his palm against the glass. The creature matched it with its claw. They stayed connected for 5 full minutes, human and predator, sharing the language of loss. When Owen finally left the gallery, he found Petra waiting in the corridor. The avian researcher's feathers were flat against her body, a sign of serious thought. I saw what you did in there, she said quietly. The pattern matching. The memorial recognition. Owen tensed. Are you going to report me? I should, Petra's head cocked to the side. But I am also a scientist, and what I saw was unexpected. The creature responded to symbolic communication. That suggests cognitive function far beyond what we assumed. It has a name, Owen said, or something like one. I have been listening to the vocal patterns. There is one sound it makes repeatedly, a rumbling call that means something like shadow that runs. I think that is what its pack called it. Petra's feathers ruffled with surprise. You learned this in 5 days? I have been studying every moment I can. The creature is not mindless, Petra. It is traumatized. There is a difference. Owen pulled out his datapad and showed her his notes. Look at these behavior patterns. The pacing follows a territorial patrol route. The destroyed objects are always items that smell like the researchers who captured it. The arranged bedding marks the spot where it last sensed its young. Every action has purpose. Petra scrolled through his documentation. Her beak clicked softly as she read. This is good work, Owen. Why did you not show this to Dr. Hallis? Would he have listened? No, Petra admitted. He would not have. But I will. You have 2 days before the termination. Can you prove the creature is sapient? I can try. Owen felt hope spark. Will you help me? Petra's feathers smoothed into a position that meant acceptance among her species. I will delay reporting your protocol violations for 48 hours. If you can demonstrate genuine two-way communication, I will bring your findings to Director Ullix. But if you fail, I must document everything. Understood? Understood. They shook hands, human style, and Petra departed. Owen returned to the observation gallery and looked down at the Crimson Stalker. The creature had returned to its memorial pattern and sat in the center, head lowered. Owen pulled out his datapad and played one of the vocalizations he had learned. The sound meant pack member. The creature's head snapped up. It stared at Owen with all 6 eyes, then responded with the same call louder. Owen played the next sound. Safe place. The creature responded, adding a questioning tone. Where? Owen pointed at his chest, then at the creature, then made a circle gesture with his arms. Here. Together. The Crimson Stalker studied him for a long moment. Then it made a new sound, one Owen had never heard. Slow and deep, with a rising note at the end. When he played it back through his datapad's analyzer, the translation software gave him an approximate meaning. Small one who sees. Owen smiled. The creature had given him a name. He had 48 hours to save a life. 48 hours to prove that deathworlders recognize their own, across species and space. 48 hours to show the galaxy that humanity belonged among the stars, not despite being predators, but because of it. Owen settled in at the observation window and began to teach a Crimson Stalker the language of hope. 24 hours remained. Owen had not slept. He sat in the observation gallery with his datapad surrounded by empty food wrappers and cooling cups of terrible station coffee. The Crimson Stalker sat on the other side of the glass, equally awake, equally focused. They were building something together, a bridge made of sound and gesture and understanding. Owen played a vocalization through his pad. The rumbling call that meant hunt together. The creature responded by standing on its hind limbs and moving its middle pair of limbs in a sweeping pattern. Owen recorded the gesture, added it to his growing database. The movement meant agreement, but more than that. It carried the sense of pack bond, of trust earned through shared danger. He tried to mirror the gesture with his own arms. The Crimson Stalker watched carefully, then adjusted its movements, slowing down so Owen could follow. Teaching. The creature was teaching him. You should rest. Petra's voice came from behind him. The avian researcher carried 2 fresh cups of coffee and a nutrition pack. She settled beside Owen and handed him the supplies. You will be worthless in your demonstration if you collapse from exhaustion. I can sleep after. Owen took the coffee gratefully and drank. We are making progress. Real progress. The vocalization patterns combine with physical gestures to create complex meanings. I have documented over 40 unique communication elements so far. Petra watched the Crimson Stalker, who had returned to all 6 limbs and was arranging small pieces of debris into patterns on the floor. What is it doing now? Telling a story. Owen pulled up his notes. Watch. It places the larger piece in the center. That represents the pack leader, usually the oldest stalker. The smaller pieces around it are pack members. The creature has been teaching me about Crimson Ridge social structure. Stalkers live in extended family groups. They share hunting territories. They raise young communally. They have something like councils where disputes are resolved through vocal debate rather than violence. Debate? Petra's feathers ruffled with interest. You are certain? I have watched recordings of Crimson Ridge packs for hours. When two stalkers disagree, they make specific sounds back and forth until one acknowledges the other's point. It is structured. It follows rules. Owen gestured at the creature. This is not a mindless predator. This is a person. Petra made a clicking sound with her beak. Dr. Hallis will never accept that. Director Ullix might, if I can prove it. They sat in silence for a while, watching the Crimson Stalker complete its story pattern. When finished, the creature looked up at Owen and made the sound for attention, followed by the gesture for question. Owen understood. It wants to know about Earth, about humans. He took a small emergency kit from his bag and emptied the contents. Bandages, water purification tablets, fire starter, emergency beacon. He arranged them on the floor in front of the observation window, creating his own story pattern. The bandages represented medicine, healing. Humans cared for injured pack members. The water tablets meant adaptation, survival. Humans could live in many environments. The fire starter showed mastery of tools and elements. The emergency beacon demonstrated pack loyalty. Humans never abandoned their own. The Crimson Stalker studied his arrangement with intense focus. Then it made a new sound, one that carried approval and something like surprise. It created its own pattern using torn bedding and debris, mirroring Owen's structure but adding elements. Two packs learning about each other across glass and atmosphere in the vast space between their worlds. Owen documented everything. Video recordings, audio files, detailed notes about each exchange. Petra helped, asking questions that forced him to explain his interpretations. By the time the station's artificial sunrise began, they had compiled a comprehensive database of human stalker communication. This is remarkable work, Petra said quietly. I have been studying xenobiology for 15 years, and I have never seen anything like this. You have created a functional language in under a week. We created it together. Owen watched the Crimson Stalker curl into a resting position, though its eyes remained open. The creature never fully slept anymore. Too much trauma. Too much fear. The creature wanted to communicate. I just had to learn how to listen. Petra stood and stretched her wings. I will present your findings to Director Ullix this morning. The demonstration is scheduled for 1400 hours. That gives you 6 hours to prepare. What will you need? Access to the containment area. Face-to-face contact not through glass. Absolutely not. That is necessary. Owen looked at Petra directly. The galaxy thinks deathworlders are monsters. They think humans survive through luck and violence. They think Crimson Stalkers are mindless killers. I can show documentation all day, but nothing will change minds like direct interaction. I need to stand in that cell and prove we can coexist. Petra's feathers flattened with concern. The creature could kill you in seconds. It could have killed 3 researchers during previous interactions. It chose to wound instead. Every act of violence has been defensive, never predatory. Owen pulled up the security footage from the earlier incidents. Look, here the stalker used its claws to slash, not stab. Slashing drives away threats. Stabbing kills prey. It was warning people to keep distance, not hunting them. That is a valid interpretation. Petra studied the footage with new eyes. But it is still incredibly dangerous. Everything worth doing is dangerous. Owen smiled tiredly. My father used to say that humans evolved alongside the most lethal predators on Earth. We learned to read their behavior, respect their space, understand their needs. Maybe that is humanity's real gift to the galaxy. Not weapons or ships or technology, just the ability to see another predator and recognize a potential friend. Petra was quiet for a long moment. Then her feathers smoothed into determination. I will speak to Director Ullix, but Owen, if the creature shows any aggression during the demonstration, security will terminate it immediately. You understand this? I understand. Then rest. You have a few hours before everything changes. Owen tried to sleep, but his mind would not stop working. He kept thinking about his father, about those long days in the Australian outback learning to read crocodile body language. to move slowly around venomous snakes, to respect the territory of sharks. His father had been dismissed as reckless by his colleagues. They said he took unnecessary risks. They said he got lucky, but his father had understood something they did not. Predators were not evil. They were not monsters. They were survivors playing by different rules, and those rules could be learned. Owen had learned. At 1300 hours, he received a message from Petra. Director Ullix had approved a modified demonstration. Owen would be allowed into the outer chamber of the containment area, but not the inner cell. There would be a reinforced barrier between him and the Crimson Stalker. Security teams would surround the area with lethal weapons ready. It was better than nothing. Owen gathered his materials and headed to the containment level. A crowd had already formed in the observation gallery. He recognized Dr. Hallis, whose eye stalks were vibrating with disapproval. Several other senior researchers stood nearby, arms crossed or wings folded or appendages arranged in positions of skepticism. Director Ullix was there too, the titanium cast being stood nearly 3 meters tall, its crystalline body reflecting the artificial lights in complex patterns. When it spoke, its voice resonated like struck metal. "You have requested an unusual demonstration, human. Explain your intentions." Owen bowed respectfully, then straightened. "Director, I believe the Crimson Stalker currently in containment is a sapient being with complex language, emotional capacity, and cultural knowledge. I have spent the past week learning its communication methods. I would like to demonstrate two-way communication that proves cognitive function equivalent to any spacefaring species." A bold claim. Director Ullix's body chimed with interest. "You have 1 hour to prove it. Failure will result in immediate termination of the subject and your removal from this station. Proceed." Owen walked into the outer chamber. The door sealed behind him with a heavy thud. He was alone now, separated from the Crimson Stalker by a barrier of reinforced transparent alloy. On the other side, the creature rose to its feet. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Human and predator, child of Earth and child of Crimson Ridge. Two deathworlders meeting in the cold space between stars. Owen made the sound for greeting, combined with the gesture for respect. The Crimson Stalker responded with the same call, deeper and more resonant. Then it did something unexpected. It lowered its head and pressed its forehead against the barrier, in the exact position that meant trust among its species. Owen stepped forward and placed his hand against the barrier, matching the gesture. Through the transparent alloy, he could feel the vibration of the creature's breathing. Steady, calm, unafraid. "My name is Owen," he said softly, making the human word with his voice while simultaneously producing the stalker sound for small one who sees. The creature made the rumbling call that Owen had learned meant shadow that runs. Then it added new sounds, teaching Owen its full name, shadow that runs between dawn and dusk, a hunter's name, a name earned. Owen repeated it carefully. The Crimson Stalker made a pleased sound and began the demonstration that would change everything. The demonstration had been running for 30 minutes when the station alarms began screaming. Red emergency lights flooded the containment area. Owen spun toward the observation gallery and saw researchers scattering in panic. Director Ullix's voice boomed through the communication system. "Radiation leak in exotic matter lab. Sections 4 through 7 initiating emergency containment. All personnel evacuate to designated shelters immediately." The floor shuddered beneath Owen's feet. Behind him, he heard the Crimson Stalker make a sharp sound of alarm. Through the chaos, Owen saw Petra at the gallery window, gesturing frantically for him to leave. But before he could move toward the exit, another tremor shook the station. The lights flickered. The containment area's door controls sparked and died. Owen was trapped. He ran to the control panel and tried to override the lock. Nothing. The system was completely dead. Through the observation window, he could see the gallery emptying as researchers fled. Only Petra remained, working frantically at an external terminal. "I am trying to override from here," her voice crackled through a damaged speaker. "But the radiation is spreading. You have maybe 10 minutes before that section becomes lethal." "Owen, I am sorry. Keep trying." Owen forced his voice to stay calm. He turned back to the barrier separating him from the Crimson Stalker. The creature stood pressed against the transparent alloy, all 6 eyes fixed on Owen. It made the sound for danger, followed by the gesture that meant pack member in trouble. The floor shook again. This time Owen heard something crack. He looked up and saw a fracture spreading across the ceiling panel. Support beams groaned. The station was tearing itself apart. A massive piece of debris crashed down from above, missing Owen by inches. The impact knocked him off his feet. He felt something in his leg snap. Pain shot through him like fire. When he tried to stand, his right leg would not support his weight. Through the barrier, the Crimson Stalker roared. Not in anger, in distress. The creature slammed its body against the transparent alloy over and over. The material was designed to hold against incredible force, but it had been weakened by the tremors. Small cracks began to spread from the impact points. No, Owen gasped. Stop, you will hurt yourself, but the creature did not stop. It battered the barrier with desperate strength. Owen realized what was happening. The Crimson Stalker was trying to reach him, trying to save him, a pack member in danger. The barrier shattered on the sixth impact. Transparent alloy exploded inward in a shower of fragments. Alarms shrieked even louder. Through his pain, Owen heard Petra screaming something about security protocols. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridors. The security teams were coming with their weapons. The Crimson Stalker burst through the broken barrier and crossed the outer chamber in 3 massive bounds. Owen tried to push himself backward, not from fear but to give the creature space. The stalker ignored his movement and instead lowered its head, examining Owen's broken leg with surprising gentleness. It made a soft sound. The vocalization meant injured young. Then it carefully, incredibly carefully, scooped Owen up in its middle set of limbs. The claws that could tear through steel folded inward to avoid cutting him. The creature cradled Owen against its chest and turned toward the exit. The door was still sealed. The radiation was getting closer. Owen could feel heat building in the air. His dosimeter badge was already turning from green to yellow. The Crimson Stalker made a decision. It carried Owen to the corner of the chamber where the ceiling had partially collapsed. Debris blocked the way, but beyond it, Owen could see an emergency access tunnel. A way out. The creature set Owen down gently behind a support beam, then turned to the debris pile. What happened next would be discussed in scientific papers for decades. The Crimson Stalker began moving the wreckage with systematic efficiency. It did not simply throw objects aside. It analyzed the pile's structure, identified key support pieces, and removed them in precise order to avoid causing further collapse. Problem solving, planning, intelligence. Owen recorded everything on his datapad with shaking hands. Even through his pain, even facing possible death, the scientist in him knew this was important. This was proof. The creature cleared a path in under 3 minutes. Then it returned to Owen, lifted him again, and carried him into the access tunnel. Behind them, the containment area began to collapse completely. The Crimson Stalker ran through the narrow passage, moving with surprising grace despite its size. Its 6 limbs found purchase on walls and ceiling, distributing weight to avoid weak points. They emerged into a maintenance corridor just as the section they had escaped fully sealed itself. Radiation warnings flashed on every wall panel. The Crimson Stalker did not stop. It carried Owen through the maze of passages, following paths it should not have known. But Owen understood. The creature had been watching, learning, studying the station's layout through observation windows and ventilation grates, mapping routes, planning just in case. They reached an intersection where several corridors met. The Crimson Stalker paused, head turning to check each direction. Its nostrils flared, scenting the air. It made a low rumbling sound, then chose the left passage. 30 seconds later, Owen heard voices. Human voices. The Crimson Stalker rounded a corner and nearly collided with a group of evacuating researchers. They screamed. One reached for an emergency alarm. No! Owen shouted. Do not hurt it. The creature saved me. It is helping. But the researchers were already fleeing. Their panic triggered more alarms. The Crimson Stalker's grip on Owen tightened protectively. It made the sound for threat nearby and backed against a wall, putting itself between Owen and the direction the researchers had gone. It is okay, Owen said softly, making the gesture for safe place. They are scared. They do not understand. Keep moving. Find medical. The creature studied him with those 6 eyes, then made a sound Owen had not heard before, a questioning tone mixed with something that felt like concern. Are you certain? Should I defend? No defending. Only running. Please. The Crimson Stalker accepted his judgment and continued through the corridors. They passed more groups of fleeing personnel. Some scrambled to get out of the way. Others stood frozen in shock. One Centauri researcher actually bowed as they passed, recognizing something profound in what he was witnessing. Finally, they reached the medical bay. The doors were open and staff were preparing to evacuate. Dr. Hallis stood near the entrance, coordinating the movement of critical equipment. He saw Owen and the Crimson Stalker and froze completely. Impossible, the Centauri whispered. All four of his arms hung limp at his sides. That creature should have killed you. That creature saved me. Owen's voice was weak now. Shock was setting in. His leg throbbed with each heartbeat. It broke through containment. It cleared debris. It carried me to safety. It protected me from panic. Tell me again that it is mindless. The Crimson Stalker carried Owen into the medical bay and set him down on an examination table with incredible gentleness. Then it stepped back and positioned itself near the door, guarding, waiting. A medical technician approached hesitantly. I need to treat his leg. The creature did not move. It simply watched. When the technician got close to Owen, the Crimson Stalker made a low warning sound. Not aggressive, just alert. The sound meant I am watching. Be careful with pack member. It is okay, Owen told the creature. They help, they heal. Like pack healer. The Crimson Stalker considered this, then deliberately stepped aside. Permission granted. The medical technician worked quickly, treating Owen's broken leg and checking his radiation exposure. Minor. He had gotten lucky. While the technician worked, more people arrived. Petra rushed in, her feathers completely disheveled. Director Ullix followed, its crystalline body chiming with agitation. Explain, the director said simply. Owen told the story while the technician wrapped his leg. The radiation leak. The trapped chamber. The rescue. Every detail. The Crimson Stalker stood throughout, occasionally making soft sounds that Owen had learned meant agreement or emphasis. When Owen finished, the medical bay was silent except for the distant alarms still echoing through damaged sections of the station. Director Ullix turned to face the Crimson Stalker. The creature met the director's gaze steadily. You saved a life today, Director Ullix said. You demonstrated intelligence, compassion, and courage. These are not qualities of mindless fauna. The Crimson Stalker made a sound. Owen translated. It says that Owen saved it first. By seeing, by listening. This was returning debt. Debt. Dr. Hallis's voice was strange, shaken. It understands the concept of debt. It understands honor. Owen looked at his teacher. It understands loyalty. It understands that pack members protect each other, even across species. These are not animal instincts, Doctor. These are values. Before anyone could respond, security teams burst into the medical bay. 6 officers with heavy weapons, all aimed at the Crimson Stalker. The creature immediately moved to put itself between the guns and Owen, lowering into a defensive crouch. Stand down, Director Ullix commanded. Lower your weapons immediately. Sir, that creature is a Class 9 predator, the security captain said. It has breached containment and saved the life of a researcher during a catastrophic emergency. Director Ullix's voice rang like struck iron. While you were securing your own evacuation routes, this being showed more courage and compassion than most of my senior staff. Lower your weapons. The security team hesitated, then complied. The Crimson Stalker remained tense, ready to defend Owen if needed. Owen struggled to sit up despite his injured leg. Please, everyone needs to understand. This is not a monster. This is a person. It has language. It has culture. It has honor. It grieves its lost family and forms bonds with new pack members. The galaxy has been wrong about deathworlders. We are not lesser. We are just different. Different, Petra repeated softly, her head tilted thoughtfully. Yes, perhaps that is the truth we have been avoiding. Deathworlders are not monsters or primitives. They are survivors who learned different lessons from their harsh worlds. Director Ullix was silent for a long moment. Then it turned to Dr. Hallis. Your assessment, Doctor? The Centauri scientist looked at Owen, then at the Crimson Stalker, then back to Owen. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone whose entire worldview had shattered. I was wrong. I allowed my prejudice to blind me to observable evidence. This creature, this person, displayed problem-solving ability, emotional intelligence, and moral reasoning. All indicators of sapience. The human was correct. I was not. It might have been the first time Owen ever heard Dr. Hallis admit being wrong about anything. The footage went viral across the Galactic Union within hours. Someone had pulled the security recordings from the containment area and leaked them to the networks. Owen watched himself being carried through collapsing corridors by a creature the galaxy had declared mindless. He watched the Crimson Stalker problem-solve and protect and choose. Compassion over escape. The response was immediate and divided. Owen sat in a recovery room with his leg elevated while the galaxy argued about what they had witnessed. His datapad streamed news feeds from a dozen worlds. Half the commentators called it proof that Deathworld species deserved full recognition. The other half insisted it was an anomaly, a fluke, a single example that proved nothing. "They are calling you the Predator Whisperer," Petra said, reading over his shoulder. She had barely left his side since the rescue. "There are proposals in the Union Council to create new classification systems for Deathworld intelligence. Your demonstration may have changed everything. Or nothing." Owen gestured at another feed where a Centauri political analyst argued that humans had probably trained the Crimson Stalker using methods that would not work on other Deathworld species. "They still want to believe we are special cases." Lucky primitives. The door opened. Director Ullix entered, followed by Dr. Hallis and three beings Owen did not recognize. Their clothing marked them as Union officials. High-ranking ones. "Owen Reed," Director Ullix said formally. "These are council representatives from the Galactic Union Central Authority. They wish to speak with you." Owen struggled to sit up straighter. His leg protested. One of the officials, a floating entity made of crystallized gases, spoke in harmonics that Owen's translator rendered as smooth words. "We have reviewed the footage and your research documentation. We have also consulted with xenolinguistics experts who confirm your communication methods demonstrate genuine two-way exchange of complex information. The question before the council is significant. Did you accomplish something unique to your individual talent, or have we underestimated an entire category of life?" "I think you know the answer," Owen said carefully. "The Crimson Stalker learned to communicate because it wanted to. It had the capacity all along. I just had to meet it halfway. Any researcher with patience and respect could have done the same. But they did not," another official said. "This one was a tripedal being with skin like tree bark. Researchers have studied Deathworld species for centuries. You are the first to achieve meaningful communication with a Class 9 predator, because I am a Deathworlder too." Owen met their gazes steadily. "I grew up on Earth, where humans share their world with creatures that can kill us. We learned to understand them because we had to. That is not special talent. That is survival skill. Every Deathworld species probably has similar capabilities if you actually listen to them, instead of treating them like animals." The crystallized gas being pulsed with thought. "You propose that Deathworld inhabitants have inherent advantages in cross-species understanding with other dangerous life forms. I propose that we understand predator behavior because we are predators. We understand territorial instincts because Earth species are territorial. We recognize pack structures because humans evolved in social groups. The Crimson Stalker and I connected because we speak the same fundamental language underneath all the different sounds and gestures. The language of survivors." Dr. Hallis spoke up quietly. "If I may offer perspective, I dismiss the humans' theories because they contradicted established research. But established research was conducted by species who evolved on peaceful worlds, safe worlds. They tried to understand Deathworld species through the lens of their own experience, which is like trying to describe color to someone who has never seen. That is a generous interpretation for your prejudice, Doctor," the tree bark official said dryly. "It is accurate nonetheless. We cannot study Deathworlds effectively if we refuse to learn from Deathworlders themselves." Dr. Hallis actually bowed toward Owen. "I was wrong to dismiss human insight. I will not make that mistake again." The officials conferred among themselves in languages Owen's translator could not parse. Finally, the gas being spoke again. "The council proposes a new program. Deathworld species will be partnered with xenobiologists to study other Deathworld fauna. Your success suggests these partnerships may reveal intelligence we have overlooked. You and your Crimson Stalker companion would serve as the first ambassadors of this program." Owen felt his heart race. The Stalker would need a proper name, using its own language. and it would need to consent. We cannot force it into service, agreed. We have arranged for a communication session. Director Ullix has converted a section of the station into temporary quarters, suitable for a Crimson Stalker. You will reside there during your recovery and help us establish formal relations with your companion. Not companion, Owen corrected. Packmate. The word matters. The officials accepted this and departed. Owen was left alone with Petra and Dr. Hallis. The Centauri scientist approached Owen's bedside with all four arms held in a gesture of respect. I owe you an apology, Dr. Hallis said. I allowed my beliefs about human limitations to blind me to your capabilities. I mocked your species and dismissed your intelligence. This was unworthy of a scientist and unworthy of a teacher. You are not the only one, Owen replied. The whole galaxy thinks deathworlders are brutal primitives, but maybe that changes now. Perhaps. Dr. Hallis's eye stalks drooped with something like shame. I have requested reassignment. I will be studying Crimson Ridge fauna, learning from local guides who actually understand the species. I have much to unlearn. After the doctor left, Petra settled into the chair beside Owen's bed. Are you really going to do this? Become an ambassador? Someone has to. Owen looked at his datapad where messages were flooding in from Earth. His mother had seen the footage. So had his old professors. So had the wildlife rangers who had worked with his father. They were proud. They understood what he had proven. What about the stalker? Does it truly want this role? Or are we projecting our hopes onto it? I will ask. Owen smiled. That is what communication means. Real questions, real answers, real choice. 2 days later, Owen was cleared to leave medical. He had a walking brace on his leg and strict orders to avoid stress. Petra pushed his wheelchair through the station corridors toward the new quarters. They passed researchers who stared openly. Some nodded with respect. Others looked away uncomfortably. The galaxy was watching. The galaxy was judging. The galaxy was slowly, reluctantly, beginning to reconsider what it thought it knew about Deathworld species. The quarters were actually an entire section of the station, modified with both human and Crimson Stalker requirements. Owen entered to find the stalker arranging debris into patterns on the floor, story patterns. When the creature saw Owen, it made the sound for greeting packmate and crossed. The space in 3 bounds, Owen reached up and placed his hand on the stalker's lowered head. Contact, trust, bond. I need to ask you something important, Owen said, using both human words and stalker vocalizations. The Council wants us to become ambassadors, to show the galaxy that Deathworlders can communicate and cooperate. But this is your choice. You can refuse. You can go home to Crimson Ridge if you want. The stalker was quiet for a long moment. Then it made a complex series of sounds that Owen had to work to translate. Pack is dead. Home is empty. New pack is here, small brother asks, so I answer. Yes, I will walk this path with you. Are you certain? This will be hard. There will be danger. There will be beings who want to prove we are monsters. The stalker made a sound that was almost like laughing. Danger is life. Monsters are only misunderstood predators. We show them truth, together. Together, Owen agreed. Petra watched the exchange with scientific fascination. I recorded all of that. The complexity of the communication is extraordinary. You are creating a new field of study. We are creating it, Owen corrected. He looked at the stalker. What should I call you? Your full name is too long for most species to pronounce. The creature considered this, then made a shorter sound. Shadow. Just Shadow. Shadow, Owen repeated. It suits you. Shadow made the pleased sound and returned to its story patterns. Owen wheeled closer to look. The creature had built a map, of sorts, showing Crimson Ridge territories and marking locations. After a moment, Owen realized what he was seeing. Other stalker packs, other potential allies. You want to bring more of your people into this? Shadow made the sound for yes, combined with the gesture that meant pack grows stronger. One voice is small, many voices make thunder. Owen understood. Shadow was not just thinking about itself or even about Crimson Stalkers. It was thinking about all Deathworlders, all the species dismissed as mindless, all the civilizations that never got the chance to speak. His datapad chimed. A message from Director Ullix. The Council had approved the ambassador program and assigned their first mission. There were reports of another Deathworld species causing problems on a mining colony. Attacks on workers. Destroyed equipment. The standard response would be extermination, but now there was another option. Now there was a human boy and a crimson stalker who spoke the language of predators. Now there was a chance to listen before deciding to kill. "We have our first assignment," Owen told Shadow. "There is a species in trouble. The council thinks they are monsters. We need to find out the truth." Shadow made the sound for hunt begins and stood. "Ready." Owen looked at Petra. "Will you come? With us? We will need a proper scientist to document everything." Petra's feathers ruffled with what might have been excitement or terror or both. "You are asking me to travel to a Deathworld colony with an apex predator and a human teenager who has only been walking for 2 days? Yes. This is completely irrational. Yes. I will need to prepare extensive safety protocols. Yes." Petra made a clicking sound with her beak, then smoothed her feathers into determination. "I will gather my equipment. When do we depart?" 2 days. That gives Shadow and me time to prepare too. Owen looked at the stalker. "We need to teach each other more words. If we are going to speak for Deathworlders, we need to speak their languages." Shadow made the sound for agreement and began a new lesson. Owen listened and learned. Human and predator building a bridge across the vast gulf of misunderstanding that had separated their kinds for so long. Outside the quarters, the galaxy continued to debate and argue and doubt. Let them, Owen thought. Words were cheap. What mattered was action. What mattered was showing, rather than telling. And he had a Crimson Stalker brother who was ready to show the galaxy exactly what Deathworlders could accomplish when someone finally bothered to listen. The mining colony on Rust Ridge looked exactly like Owen had expected. Prefabricated buildings clustered around massive excavation sites, all surrounded by hostile alien terrain. The planet's red soil contained valuable minerals, but also supported an ecosystem that made Crimson Ridge look welcoming. Everything here had evolved to survive in metal-rich dirt that poisoned most carbon-based life, including the spine crawlers. Owen stood on the landing pad with Shadow at his side and Petra close behind. The colony administrator, a nervous centauri, named Helix, kept as much distance as possible from Shadow while explaining the situation. "The attacks began 3 months ago," Helix said. His eye stalks swiveled constantly between Owen and Shadow. "Equipment destroyed, power lines severed. 2 workers injured when a crawler broke into the dormitory. We requested permission to exterminate the local population, but the council sent you instead." "Because extermination is permanent," Owen said. "Understanding is not. Where did the attacks happen?" "I will show you." Helix led them to a damaged section of the perimeter fence. Deep gouges marked the metal posts. "They come at night, always from the mining sites. We thought they were defending territory, but we surveyed this area for 2 years before building. There were no crawlers here then." Shadow moved forward and examined the gouges carefully. The stalker's nostrils flared, scenting the marks. It made a low sound to Owen. "Old damage." "Many days passed. Trail is cold." "Can we see the mining sites?" Owen asked. Helix hesitated. "It is not safe. The crawlers nest in the deep excavations now. That is why we are here." Owen adjusted his walking brace and nodded to Shadow. "We speak their language, or we will learn to." The mining site was a massive crater carved into the red earth. Terraced levels descended hundreds of meters, each one marked with abandoned equipment and broken lighting rigs. At the bottom, Owen could see dark openings where tunnels led deeper underground. "The crawlers live down there now," Helix explained. "We tried gas to drive them out, but they seem to thrive on it. We tried sonic deterrents, but they just destroyed the equipment. Nothing works." Shadow made a questioning sound and gestured at the crater. Owen understood. The stalker wanted to know what the miners had been extracting. "Helix, what minerals are you mining here?" "Ferrous compounds mostly. Rich iron deposits mixed with trace radioactive elements, very valuable for ship manufacturing." The administrator's eye stalks drooped with frustration. "We invested heavily in this site. If we cannot mine safely, the entire operation becomes unprofitable." Owen looked at Petra. Iron-rich environment. Radioactive traces. What kind of biology would evolve here? Petra pulled out her scanning equipment. Likely silicon-based rather than carbon. Possibly metal-dependent metabolism. I would need samples to confirm. She pointed at the dark tunnel openings. If the crawlers nested in the excavations after mining began, perhaps they were drawn by something exposed during digging. Shadow made an urgent sound. The gesture that accompanied it meant understanding comes. The stalker pointed with one claw at the mining equipment scattered across the crater, then made the sound for young place. Young place? Owen thought hard. Wait. You think this is a nesting ground? Shadow made the yes sound and began moving down the crater's terraced levels. Owen followed as quickly as his brace allowed, with Petra and a very reluctant Helix behind them. They descended past silent machinery and broken barriers until they reached the lowest level. The tunnel openings were larger up close. Each one was surrounded by strange formations that looked like crystallized metal. Shadow approached carefully and made soft sounds, the same gentle vocalizations it used for injured young, movement in the darkness. Something uncurled from the shadows. The spine crawler was aptly named. Its body was covered in metallic spines that caught the light like blades. It was smaller than Owen had expected, maybe 2 meters long, with multiple limbs adapted for digging. Its head was eyeless, but sensory organs twitched toward them. Shadow lowered itself into a non-threatening posture and continued the soft sounds. The crawler remained still, listening. Then it responded with a high-pitched tone that made Owen's teeth ache. It is communicating, Petra whispered. Her equipment was recording everything. The frequency is above normal hearing range for most species. That is why previous researchers missed it. Shadow and the crawler exchanged sounds for several minutes. Owen watched the body language, trying to understand the conversation. The crawler seemed agitated but not aggressive, defensive but not attacking. After a while, it retreated into the tunnel and made a beckoning gesture with one limb. I think it wants us to follow, Owen said. Absolutely not, Helix protested. That is suicide. That is communication. Owen looked at Shadow, who made the sound for trust pack mate. We go together. Shadow leads. They entered the tunnel. The walls glowed faintly with bioluminescence from metal-eating bacteria. The air smelled like rust and electricity. The crawler moved ahead of them, checking back regularly to ensure they followed. Deeper and deeper they went, until the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. Owen stopped and stared. The chamber was filled with crystalline structures, each one glowing with internal light. But these were not mineral formations, they were eggs, hundreds of them carefully arranged and tended. A nursery, Petra breathed. This is a breeding chamber. The crawler led them to a section of wall where the mining equipment had broken through. On the other side, Owen could see the scars of excavation. The miners had been digging directly toward this chamber. A few more weeks and they would have destroyed it completely. Shadow made a low, mournful sound. The same sound it had made for its own lost young. It understood what the crawlers had been defending. Not territory, not resources. Children. Owen turned to Helix. You were not surveying empty land. You were digging into their nursery. The crawlers were not here before because they only gather here to breed. It probably happens on a cycle. Every few years they return to lay eggs in the mineral-rich soil where their young can develop. Helix's eye stalks trembled. We did not know. The surveys showed no life signs. Because you were looking for the wrong kind of life. Owen gestured at the eggs. These are silicon-based organisms with metal metabolism. Your surveys were calibrated for carbon-based signatures. To your equipment, they looked like rocks. Shadow approached the crawler and made a series of sounds. A proposal, an offer. The crawler listened, then responded. The conversation was complex, involving multiple vocalizations and gestures. Owen could only follow parts of it, but the meaning was clear. Shadow was negotiating. Finally, Shadow turned to Owen and made the sound for agreement reached. It gestured at the eggs, then at the mining site, then made the symbol for time passing. I think Shadow negotiated a truce, Owen said. The crawlers will stop attacking if the miners stop digging toward the nursery. Give them time to raise their young. Maybe 1 year? The crawler made an affirmative sound and added more high-pitched tones. Petra checked her equipment. It is specifying a time period. Based on frequency analysis, I estimate it means 8 to 9 standard months. 9 months for the eggs to mature, Owen said. Then the crawlers leave and do not return for several years. Can your mining operation work around one protected chamber for that time? Hillix's eye stalks waved with calculation. If we reroute the excavation to avoid that section, we lose perhaps 15% efficiency, but we avoid the cost of security measures, equipment replacement, and potential council sanctions for extinction of a possibly sapient species. Yes, this is acceptable. Shadow made the pleased sound and communicated this to the crawler. The creature responded by leading them to another tunnel, one that curved around the nursery chamber. It marked the walls with its spines, creating clear boundary lines. This far, no farther. They emerged from the tunnels an hour later. Word of their negotiation had spread through the colony. Miners gathered to watch as Owen and Shadow stood in the center of the crater with the spine crawler beside them. Tell your people, Owen called up to Hillix. The crawlers are not monsters. They are parents protecting their children. Respect the boundaries. Give them space. In 9 months they will leave peacefully. The crawler made a final high-pitched sound, then returned to the tunnels. Shadow watched it go and made a contemplative noise. Owen understood. The stalker was thinking about its own lost young, about all the deathworlder parents who had been killed for defending their families. First contact successful, Petra said, her voice shaking slightly with excitement. Documented communication between 3 species from 3 different deathworlds. This is unprecedented. Over the following weeks, the story spread across the Galactic Union. The boy and the stalker had done it again. Not with violence or threats, but with understanding. The mining colony implemented the negotiated boundaries. The crawlers stopped attacking, and 9 months later, when the eggs hatched, the galaxy watched in wonder as hundreds of small spine crawlers emerged and migrated away from the mining site. Following their parents to other territories, Owen and Shadow became legends. The Predator Whisperer and his brother, traveling to disputed colonies and hostile worlds, speaking languages that others could not hear, finding solutions that others never imagined. They were not the only ones. The ambassador program expanded rapidly. Other deathworlders were recruited to work with their own kind. A Crimson Ridge stalker named Dusk partnered with a human researcher named Lily to study aggressive fauna on volcanic worlds. A human tracker named Robert worked with a species called the Deep Swimmers to resolve conflicts in ocean colonies. Dr. Hallis published his research on communication methodologies across deathworld species. He gave full credit to Owen for the foundational work and publicly apologized for his previous prejudice. His papers became required reading for xenobiology students throughout the Union. Petra received recognition for her documentation work and was promoted to lead the new Deathworld Studies Institute. She built a team of researchers who approached dangerous species with respect rather than fear. Director Ullix expanded Deepwatch 7 to include dedicated quarters for multiple Deathworld ambassadors. The station became a hub for cross-species understanding, where predators from different worlds learned from each other. 5 years after the first meeting between Owen and Shadow, the Galactic Union Council held a historic vote. Deathworld species were reclassified from potentially dangerous fauna requiring management to sapient civilizations deserving diplomatic recognition. The change was not unanimous, but the evidence was overwhelming. Hundreds of successful negotiations, dozens of documented communication systems, proof that intelligence took many forms and that survival created its own wisdom. Owen stood on the observation deck of Deepwatch 7 with Shadow at his side. They watched ships come and go, carrying deathworlders to new assignments across the galaxy. Humans and crimson stalkers and spine crawlers and dozens of other species, all working together to bridge the gap between safe worlds and death worlds. We started something, Owen said quietly. Shadow made a sound that meant more than started. Changed. Future different now. Do you ever regret it? Leaving Crimson Ridge? Becoming this instead of just living? The stalker was quiet for a moment, then made a complex series of vocalizations. Old pack lost. New pack found. Alone was death. Together is life. Choice was easy. Owen placed his hand on Shadow's head. That familiar gesture of trust. Yeah, together is always better. Below them, a shuttle launched carrying 2 new ambassadors. A young human woman and a crimson stalker who had asked to serve with deathworlders who understood loss. They were heading to a disputed mining world where a species called the Stone Singers was causing problems. Owen had trained the woman himself, teaching her the methods his father had taught him and that Shadow had refined. Respect the predator. Learn its language. Understand its world. Never assume that different means lesser. They will do well, Shadow said in the carefully learned human words. The stalker's accent was heavy, but the meaning was clear. They will, Owen agreed. Because we showed them how. Petra joined them at the observation window. I just received a message from the council. They want you two to attend a formal ceremony on the Union homeworld, something about medals and diplomatic recognition. Owen made a face. Speeches and formal clothes? Afraid so. Shadow made the sound for dislike of confined spaces and the gesture for excessive attention. We could refuse, Owen suggested. You could, Petra said. But you would also miss meeting the 3 spine-crawler ambassadors, who specifically requested to meet the small brother who speaks. They have a gift for you. Something about naming rights. Owen's eyes widened. They want me to name something? Their species, actually. They decided that humans and stalkers earned the right to give them a proper designation for Union records. Shadow made the pleased sound. This was a great honor among deathworlders. To name another species meant permanent recognition, a bond that would last generations. Okay, Owen said. We will go to the ceremony. But we wear comfortable clothes. I will inform the council of your diplomatic requirements, Petra said dryly. They stood together watching the stars. 3 survivors from 3 different worlds who had learned that understanding was stronger than weapons. They had been laughed at once. The human boy who talked to monsters. The predator who trusted a small brother. The scientist who believed impossible things. Now the galaxy listened when they spoke, not because they demanded attention, but because they had proven something fundamental. Deathworlders were not savage. They were not primitive. They were not lesser. They were survivors who had learned the hardest lessons from the harshest teachers. They knew that strength came in many forms. That intelligence wore many faces. That family could cross any boundary if you were brave enough to reach out your hand, or your claw. The shuttle disappeared into the endless dark, carrying hope to another world that needed to learn what Owen and Shadow already knew, that predators could be brothers, that monsters could be friends, that the galaxy was large enough for everyone if we just stopped being afraid of the teeth. Owen smiled and leaned against Shadow's warm bulk. His packmate, his brother, his proof that the universe rewarded those who chose understanding over fear. They had laughed at the Terran, boy who talked to monsters. Now the monsters were teaching the galaxy to listen, and the galaxy would never be the same.